Okay. So we are going live, my friends. We are going live. Passover 2021. Getting ready. I hope you're getting ready for Pesach. And in this video, we're going to talk about a few things we still need to do before the Seder. But most of it is going to be about the actual Seder. So it would probably make sense to get a pen and a pencil and a piece of paper, or maybe diary, whatever you use, to take a few notes, especially if you're planning to run a Seder at home. But even if not, I would still suggest that if you really want to make this useful, the time you spend with me tonight, you probably want to take a few notes, and I highly recommend doing that. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to dedicate our time first to the preparatory stage. A few things we still need to do. Bedikat Chametz, checking for Chametz this year is also a bit unusual. We don't do it on Shabbos. Obviously, we do it the day before. We're going to talk about the Mitzvah of Bedikat Chametz a little bit. Briefly, I will describe what this is and how we do it. And what happens this year with Shabbos, which is a big topic. What are we doing this Shabbos? We having a problem with, of course, not being able to eat matzah day before the Seder. It's a well-known concept that we need to come to the Seder hungry for matzah, so we don't eat matzah before the Seder. And at the same time, at least on Shabbos day, certainly after Sof Zman Achilat Chametz, after the time that is marked in the calendar, it's about 10:30 in the morning, we're not allowed to eat Chametz anymore on Shabbos day. So we're stuck. We're supposed to have Shabbos meal, and we cannot do it with Chametz, and we cannot do it with matzah either. So what are we going to do? We're going to talk about it, and I'm going to bring you a couple of solutions here. But the most important thing, of course, we're going to go through the Passover Agadah. We're going to go through this Agadah, and if you have the standard edition, which is Family Agadah, I highly recommend this for the Passover table. It's a simple, very well written text with English translation, easy to follow. You probably want to have a text like that available to everybody. Every Judaica store has it. You can get it online. It's very easy to find. So certainly highly recommend it. And we're going to go over that a little bit through the steps of the Seder. And I try to give you some tips and ideas how to make the Seder really interesting. So, first of all, I do look a little bit tired with all the cleaning, of course. I'm sure everyone's tired at this point. We still have a couple of days before the Seder, actually. But this year, as we said, 2021 is an interesting year where we're having Passover falling right on Motzei Shabbos, which doesn't happen that often. Next time it's going to happen, if I'm not mistaken, 2025. And then for about 20 years, we're not going to have it. So this is quite unique that this year we are having this flow of Shabbos into Pesach, which creates a couple of interesting questions. We're going to deal with those questions. But I'm going to start with what usually you start with. If you take a look at the Sefer, this Family Agadah, it's got to start with Bedikat Chametz, and that's what I'm going to start with. So after you searched and basically cleaned your house and you put aside everything that you're not going to use for Pesach, you put them in the cabinets, you marked clearly things as Chametz, and those things you're going to sell. We're going to talk a little bit about the sale as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Mechirat Chametz and how you accomplish that. But you should be doing that, obviously, as you do a regular year. The difference this year, though, is that Bedikat Chametz, we usually do it day before the Seder. This year, we cannot do it day before the Seder. We cannot do it night before the Seder because it's Shabbos. And obviously on Shabbos, you're not going to be able to put the flashlight on or put any type of light on. This is a desecration of Shabbat. Of course, you're not going to do it. So what happens this year, technically, you could have been doing Bedikat Chametz, at any point earlier. But our sages insisted that Bedikat Chametz has to happen le'or haner. It has to happen at the time when there's no physical light outside. And so your little light that you're having the light of a candle, or I would suggest the light of a flashlight. Actually, it's even better these days, because with a candle, you may be concerned you're going to destroy it's going to drip, and you're going to destroy your beautiful furniture or your floor, whatever you have around that's of value. So you may not be able to do proper Bedikat Chametz, proper search. So maybe it's better to do it with a flashlight. So this year we do it Thursday night. We don't do it on Friday in the morning and afternoon. We do it on Thursday night. The reason being, it has to be done at night, as I just explained. So with a nightfall on Thursday, at any point, you can start doing Bedikat Chametz. If you got stuck a little bit with kashering and some other things, and some last preparations, not all your chametz is in the right place yet, you can do it a little bit later, but it has to be done at night. So what do you need for Bedikat Chametz? At this point, usually you would have all your chametz already clearly marked and separated. Some of it is probably in some cabinets locked, and if you sell it, it's going to be basically not used throughout the duration of the holiday. Some people have a tradition of not selling something that's definite chametz vade. We will talk a little bit about it a little bit later. But you do make a blessing on Bedikat Chametz. The blessing is, if you take a look at this edition of the Passover Agadah, the blessing for it is, it can be found right at the beginning. We make a blessing on Bir Chametz, which is the mitzvah to getting rid of chametz. So we initiate the search with a bracha, with a blessing. Usually, if you can afford doing it in such a way that actually the whole family participates, it's nice. And it could be a lot of fun. You could get kids involved. You could get, especially these days, you have kids, everybody has a cell phone. So you could just basically download a flashlight app on a cell phone, and all the kids could go with you together. You could recite a blessing. And after you recite a blessing, you should keep quiet at least for some time. That's one of those hard things for a Jew, right, to do, to be quiet. But the idea is, of course, you should find some chametz. Now, here comes another Jewish mysterious custom, which goes both ways. It could be good, it could be not so good. Depending on what type of a Jew you are, you will make a decision. The problem now is we have a little bit of OCD. We got a little bit of that OCD culture, right? Obsessive compulsive. What if? In other words, I just made a blessing on getting rid of chametz. What if I'm not going to find anything? Because all my chametz is already in the cabinets, and it's already sold, and I'm going to look for that one because that's going to be sold. And if I don't sell anything, I just got rid of all the chametz, my house is clean. What's going to happen at that point? So some people, out of that concern, have a custom of putting 10 little pieces and hiding them around the house. And as you do that, this guarantees that you're going to find something and your blessing is not in vain, which is a beautiful thing if you really remember where you put those things. Because if you forgotten one of those 10, and it happened to me actually a couple of times that they were hidden so well that I could find only 9 out of 10. Oops, that's a problem. What do you do then? Well, the truth of the matter is, if you're not going to find it throughout the duration of the Seder, of the Pesach, for the whole week, it's going to be stuck somewhere. We rely on the fact that at the end of Bedikas Chametz, you're going to say that all chametz, any chametz which is in my possession, you have it also here in any standard edition of the Haggadah, which starts with Bedikas Chametz and explains what you do. After you searched, you say at the end, and you say it in any language. It's actually written in Aramaic language, which was the language of vernacular of the people back in the day. So today we use Hebrew, English, Russian, Spanish, whatever your native tongue, you can use that language, and you should say something that you actually understand. It should be the language you understand, you and the family knows. Any chametz which is in my possession, which I did not see and remove, or which I don't know about, which is the case with the 10 little pieces if one of them got lost. shall be nullified and become ownerless, something that is hefker, something that nobody owns, and which is basically the fulfillment of the mitzvah based on the Torah law. The Torah law only requires us to nullify the Chametz, and just to do that would be enough. The whole idea of Bedikat Chametz, the whole idea that we need to search for Chametz, comes from the rabbis. It's a rabbinical law, and the reason for that being, as rabbis explain in the Talmud, technically you could have just said this, right? Whatever Chametz is in my possession is ownerless right now. I declare it being hefker, ownerless. It's not mine. I don't want it. I don't need it for the duration of the holiday, and that should be enough. And here we have a problem. What happens if you change your mind during the holiday? You found some really nice piece of chametz, some good-looking cake that you forgot somewhere in the fridge or somewhere in the cabinet, and you look at it, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, oh, that's actually pretty good. I can keep it. I can use it later. Wow. If that happens, you nullified your original intention, and you're basically declaring in your mind that you really want to use that, which makes your whole nullification invalid. And out of that concern, rabbis are saying, well, you need to search for chametz. You need to make sure you're getting rid of chametz. It's not enough just to mentally nullify. But as far as Torah is concerned, mentally nullifying works. So that would help us if you follow the custom of taking those 10 little pieces of bread or whatever you have, the chametz that you prepared for Bedikat Chametz specifically, to make sure that your blessing is not in vain, and you only find 9 out of 10. So, okay, fine, you couldn't find a 10th? Well, you nullified it. You nullified it, and you're certainly not interested in finding it. You certainly don't want that chametz to be in your possession, and that should be just fine. By the way, there's a lot of chumrot, so many different stringencies in the laws of Passover, laws of Pesach, and that's how many people spend too much time, I think, on cleaning before the Pesach, so they simply have very low energy at the Seder. And we're going to get to the point, which I think is very important. We should rest. This year we have, thank God, we have Shabbos. So this year all the preparations got to be done a little earlier. We're not going to run into that rush situation right into Pesach. And we're actually going to enjoy Shabbos, which is a beautiful thing if you think about it. It does seem to be quite difficult, this whole situation, Shabbos into Pesach transition. But on the other hand, it has a tremendous blessing in it, which is that we got to rest and we got to prepare for the Seder. So my suggestion to you is use the Shabbos rest, prepare well for the rest of Shabbos, to prepare well for the night of the Seder. Because if you prepare well for the night of the Seder, you're going to have an amazing Seder experience. And it doesn't matter whether you're going to run it at home yourself. This year, of course, is different. Many places don't run community Seders, and many of us will have to run their own Seders. And even if you come to somebody's Seder and you come prepared, you know what's happening, you're certainly in a much better place. Your Seder experience will be way more meaningful. So what we'll try to do, after I speak a little bit about a few more things that happen before the Seder, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens on Shabbos, as I said, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Mechirat Chametz, the Chametz sale. We just discussed Bedikat Chametz for those who joined us. We just discussed how to do it, and by the way, this is going to be also recorded, so you will be able to listen to it on our channel, on Jewish Explorer channel. And if you need to know certain things that I'm not going to touch upon in this video, cleaning or kashering, I posted a bunch of links. You can look into those links with plenty of details of how to kasher your house, how to clean your house, what are the most important things in terms of the preparation for the Seder, for the Passover, to make everything kosher, and at the same time not to get stressed. By the way, on my YouTube channel, there's a video in Russian, which is exactly on that theme, on that topic, how to prepare your house in a kosher way, and at the same time, not getting overstressed in that process. So take a look at that video. I'm going to post the link under this one, and it's on my YouTube channel, Jewish Explorer channel. You can find it there. So as we discussed Bedikat Chametz, one more thing, of course, which is important this year and always, if you do sell chametz, this year we're in a tricky situation. Technically, you can eat chametz until Shabbos morning, but if you want to sell chametz, you cannot validate the sale being effective as of Shabbos. So if you put your chametz aside and you still plan to use some of your chametz this Shabbos, we'll get how you can do it. It's a tricky business because you're probably going to use your Passover dishes already. But if you're still thinking of using some of the chametz for Shabbos, which you technically can do until about 10:30 in the morning, take a look at the calendar, depending on your location. The end of the 4th hour is the time you can still eat chametz on eve of Passover. This year it's Shabbos. So you got to be very, very careful not to take anything from the sale, because that sale has been already effective as of Friday before Shabbos. And you take a look, those people who are careful in their contracts and they actually sign a decent contract on chametz sale, it's got to specify the time. If you still need to, make a chametz sale, I have those forms. You can do one with me. It's not a problem. You can do it throughout Thursday at any point. And a sale is going to be effective Friday morning. So that means you have to put your chametz aside unless you want to keep some for Shabbos. And then you designate it and put it in a different place. But whatever is going to be part of the sale has to be put aside, marked clearly that this is chametz that's sold. And you're not touching it from Friday morning until the end of Pesach. Basically right after Pesach is over, 5-10 minutes afterwards, you can open your cabinets and start using your chametz. Now, the thing with a chametz sale, of course, as you're probably aware, is a bit of a technical issue, but it also has halachic problems with it, because really what happens, the way sale has been effective and the practice, common practice today is it very much looks like ha'arama. Ha'arama or ha'aroma in Ashkenazi pronunciation, and that's what many rabbis were concerned with. It doesn't look like a real thing. It very much looks like a way to avoid being in possession of chametz, but at the same time you're not really intending to sell anything, because the way it works, it is actually much like a legal fiction. It has to be done in a very correct legal way, as a proper legal document and a contract. But what happens is a non-Jew only pays a symbolic amount, could be $1, even less, for that huge bulk of chametz that has been collected from different places. In Israel, very often, if you sell through the chief rabbinate, they have the ceremony with the sheikh or with the muhtar, the leader of the community in Abu Ghosh. He comes to the headquarters in Jerusalem where they initiate the sale. Pretty much all the chametz of Israel has been sold there. And you can imagine it's millions and millions of dollars. And he pays a very symbolic amount of money, maybe $1 or so. So that's a prepayment. And he would have to put the full amount by the end of Passover. And as the end of Passover approaches and he didn't put any of that amount, it basically means that as Passover is over and he didn't put that money by the deadline, the sale is invalid. But what helps is throughout the whole Pesach, it was not in our possession. It wasn't in possession of that non-Jew. So it does look a little bit, one can say fishy, a little bit tricky. And as you can imagine, this is not something that everybody agrees upon. And that's why, for instance, if you really want to be serious about it, and we live in America, thank God, God bless America, we are not needy people. If you can afford not selling your basics, something that's not expensive, you don't really have to sell it. You can give it to some friends who are non-Jews, just as a present, just as a gift. You probably don't want to waste food. You don't want to throw it into garbage. You can keep a little bit for burning of the chametz, which this year is happening Friday morning. But you certainly may sell something that's expensive. If you have some nice chametz, something like this, a beautiful bottle of whiskey, which I got as a gift, thank you. And it's there with me. I'm not going to waste it. I'm not going to destroy it. It's a valuable chametz. It's something you can enjoy with your friends, and family. So certainly that's valuable, and that could be included in the sale, basically, according to all opinions. Actually, the original reason why this sale was necessary, it was for commercial reasons, for the businesses. you would have many Jewish people in medieval Europe being stuck. They would not be able to own land. Jews were not allowed to own land in Europe. So they would be stuck in all sorts of businesses, very often dealing with whiskey, beer, all sorts of chametz. And if you have commercial amount of whiskey or beer and in the market, and this is your business, you cannot just get rid of all of that stuff in one day, and it's impossible. It's an impossibility. So this solution came as a very practical one, but for private people, unless you're dealing with something expensive, you probably, if you're talking about a bunch of spaghettis or something like that, you can probably either finish it before the Seder or just give it over as a gift to a non-Jew, to some of your friends or whoever there is. And this way you're just getting rid of it. However, if you do want to rely on a sale and sell whatever chametz you have, that's fine. You can do that too. You just got to be careful with filling out the details of the form correctly. So it's also a tradition that when a person comes to sell his chametz, he comes to a rabbi, he comes to whoever is initiating the sale. He may give some money for charity, and we have this idea of kimcha de pischa, which literally means from Aramaic language, it's the money for the Passover, the money for the flour from which you're going to make matzahs. In other words, it's the money on which the person is going to buy the Passover meal. And you have all sorts of organizations. I will post on my chat, on my WhatsApp chat, the name of the organization where you can donate the money for Kimcha de Pischa in Israel, fulfilling the mitzvah to help the needy. And that's a beautiful way, because really, if you take a look what happens at the Passover night, symbolically we open our doors to everybody. Symbolically we proclaim at the beginning of a Seder that everybody can join us. But these days, very often it's a symbolism and it's not very practical. If you really want to make it practical, you want to make sure that Passover is about Jewish unity, it's about helping each other. It is a good idea to bring that charity and to help the needy families, Kimcha de Pischa donation. And I would highly encourage you doing that, whether you choose the charity that I'm going to post about in my WhatsApp group or any other one, it does not matter. But it's certainly a good idea to do it. Very often people do that, donating money during the Mechirat Chametz, during the Chametz sale, and it's a very good custom to do that. Now, we get into the actual Seder. Before we get into the Seder, I want to talk about Shabbos. And Shabbos is very interesting. Shabbos this year, that falls on Passover Eve, as I said, has a bunch of interesting challenges. The biggest challenge, of course, is that it's a Seder that comes after the day on which you're not allowed to eat matzah, and you're supposed to have a meal. Shabbos is supposed to have a Shabbos meal. So matzah you cannot yet have, because Talmud Yerushalmi says one needs to come to the Seder with with an appetite for the matzah, and that's the position most of our rabbis and poskim they take. So pretty much according to all opinions, one cannot really have matzahs day before the Passover. So matzah is out of question for the blessing during the Shabbos meals. We have a mitzvah on Shabbos, of course, to have 3 meals, right? So matzah is out of question. Now, what about chametz? Now, chametz could be an option for Friday night for sure, and you technically could even do that Shabbos morning, and some people do that, and actually that's a prevailing custom. But if you ask my opinion, I think this prevailing custom has some challenges, some very significant challenges. So I will explain the prevailing custom first, and then as I do, I will possibly show you the alternative, which I think is better for many people for practical reasons. So the prevailing custom is that both Friday night and Shabbos morning you use chametz for the blessing or during the Shabbos meal. So Friday night you probably already have in your home very much prepared for Pesach. You were cooking Shabbos in Pesach dishes, which means there's a bit of a challenge. What are you going to do? You're going to, first of all, wash your hands, make a blessing on the challah, and remove the challah from the table or whatever crumbs you have there. Your home is Pesach, your home at this point is clean. So that creates a challenge. If you have kids at home, that creates even a bigger challenge. And then it looks a little bit unnatural that you don't really enjoy your Shabbos meal as much, because there's a lot obsessive compulsive thinking. What's going to happen with the crumbs? What's going to happen with this? What's going to happen with that? And you ate that bread, obviously not on a Passover dish. You cannot eat bread on a Passover dish, right? So you ate it from some plastic plate. So you humbly removed this piece of bread, this challah, with a plastic, and then you proceed to serve the actual meal, at which you're not going to have any of the bread, which is again kind of unusual. But that's Friday night. It gets better on Shabbos day. Shabbos day actually gets really very crazy, because Shabbos day you usually have your Shabbos meal, enjoying your meal at some normal time, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Some people do it later. But this year, obviously, if you got to eat bread, and you cannot eat matzah, as we just said, so what else you have? You got to eat bread, right? So if you got to eat bread on Shabbos morning, you got to finish eating bread by 10:30 in the morning. So you got to wake up early and have an early Shabbos minyan and come back home quickly in haste, get all your family together and eat that bread. And again, you got to be very careful not to leave the crumbs anywhere on the table or on the floor. And that's an OCD kind of situation, right? And then you remove that, you're getting rid of whatever possibly left. You're going to make sure you dump it somewhere, you remove it. You cannot burn it at this point already, it's Shabbos. So you either have to finish this, or you're going to make sure that if it's in the garbage, you remove that garbage, it's not at home, and that's it, right? Set two. At this point, you can serve the actual meal, which is served in Passover already kelim, in Passover dishes, and it's a kosher for Pesach food. So it doesn't touch, it doesn't interact with the bread. So we're having this very unusual situation this year, which creates a lot of, tension. And I think it's an unnecessary tension, unless you really want to follow that opinion, which for some reason most people do follow. But you have a solution, and a solution is, of course, you can take something with which you're not fulfilling the obligation of Passover matzah, something that is not bread and not chametz either, something that is kosher for Passover, something which you can make a bracha of amotzi on, and that something, my friends, is egg matzah. And this solution has been brought by a bunch of commentators, and not everybody agrees with that for different reasons. But I would say, practically speaking, unless you know that you're a very careful person and you can actually wake up early in the morning Shabbos and do your meal with bread at a proper time, you're certainly running the risk of not doing that with bread. And probably it is a better option of choosing egg matzah for Friday night and Shabbos day, and that's what I recommend. You can get egg matzah pretty much in any Jewish store. You can go here in Brooklyn and get one. It is the custom, Ashkenazi custom. Not only we do not fulfill the obligation of eating matzah on Passover Seder with egg matzah, we're not even supposed to eat it as it's, an Ashkenazi custom only to give it to people who, sick or not feeling well. So usually we don't eat it during the Seder, and throughout the duration of the Pesach, we try to not eat it. But certainly for Shabbat, which is before Pesach, one can have it. And that, I think, is an ideal solution. So you pick up option 1 or option 2. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. And the main thing is we're going to enjoy our Shabbos meal Friday night and Shabbos day. And I think it's very important, actually, to experience the joy of Shabbos. And, with all these little concerns about what's going to happen with the bread, you may kind of ruin it. So I don't think it's worth it. I think the spirit of Shabbos is very, very important, and we should definitely enjoy it. Moving on from Shabbos to the Passover Seder, to the actual Seder. I will briefly go over all the 15 steps of the Seder. If you follow me with the Passover Agadah, I'm using this standard edition of the family Agadah. This is article edition that most homes have. It's very affordable and it's very easy to find. Any Judaica bookstore would have it. So it's convenient, and I highly recommend having it at the Seder. At the same time, I do recommend you preparing some ideas from different editions, because this one is very scarce on commentaries. it only has, we have a comment here that Shabbos is the best out of Pesach. I actually made that point, Alina. Yeah, I agree 100%. There is actually, you prepared for the Seder, you have the whole day of rest, 100%. I would just say you may go a little bit OCD with thinking about bread if you use bread for the meals, but if not, then use like matzah, then I agree with you 100%. But it's a good point, it's a good idea to spend some time preparing. This year we have Shabbos to prepare for the Seder, to read a little bit more from various editions of Passover Agada with commentators. You have a bunch of those any Judaica store would have. And this one is good to have at the Seder, because what you want to have at the Seder, you don't want to have pages and pages and pages of commentaries, and you're going to lose the text, you're going to lose the structure. And of course, you want to make sure that if you're running the Seder, that it's done in a way that nobody is getting lost in the process. You need to think about the kids. And our rabbis, when they came up with the idea of Passover Seder, they were quite concerned with how kids going to react. So there are a bunch of things that are in the order. Seder, of course, means order. In the order of the things, the way they happen, they've been done specifically with kids in mind. And so we should really think about how we're going to make sure our kids and everybody at the table, we have elderly people, we have people who may not understand the language, we may have people with different mentalities. We got to think about how we got to create, it's the leader of the Seder who's got to think about it, how we got to create an experience that's meaningful and that's not rushing and just going through the motions on one hand, but also not overdoing the commentaries. Of course, everybody's familiar with the story that the rabbis were sitting in Bnei Brak, out of all places. Bnei Brak is mentioned here in the Passover Haggadah, and they got so engaged in the conversation about the Exodus that they literally were there for the whole night until they heard knock, knock, knock. The students came and said, it's the time to read Shema. It's the morning of the next day. And that is being brought as an example of how we can run our Passover Seder. But, well, I've been with my Rosh Hashiva at the Seder, which ended at 3:30 in the morning. And I myself, to be honest, quite guilty of running very long Zdorim. Now I become a little older, I understand that you need to be a little bit more considerate to people present at the table. You want to make sure it's fun, it's interesting. You probably don't want to overdo it. And so if you prepare it well, you will be able to do it fun and not very long at the same time. So let's take a look at the steps. First of all, of course, we have the Seder plate. As you know, there are various customs of the Seder plate. The one you have here is the traditional Seder plate, which has 6 elements over here, 3 triangle on the top and 3 down the bottom, right? So we're going to go briefly over those 6 on the plate, and there are different ways how to arrange the Seder plate. If you follow Gaon of Vilna, he has a very different arrangement. Rav Moshe Isserlis also has a different one, but this one is stuck at every single edition of the Passover Haggadah, unless you're looking for specific ones. Somehow, this is the mystical, the Kabbalistic tradition, which became very popular, and it's not the Ramor custom, but it's the Arizal's custom that most people follow when they arrange the Seder plate. But if you want to do your own research and follow the draw, which, by the way, doesn't use 3 matzahs, it only uses 2 matzahs. That's what I've been doing for years. Or you want to do the Ramor way, you can certainly do that. I would say it's a good way to educate yourself about different ways how you can arrange the Seder plate. However, if you follow this custom, so we have 6 things on the plate. Let's take a brief look what we have. We don't have matzahs on the plate. According to Gaon of Vilna custom, you do have matzah on the plate. Here you don't. So you have matzah somewhere on the side. Usually you put it, of course, covered. And you have a special beautiful cover for the matzah right next to the Seder plate. On the Seder plate you have, on top you have beitzah, which is an egg, right? And of course it symbolically represents, most of the things on a Seder plate are symbolic. Symbolically represents the Korban Chagiga, the offering, which was brought in the temple for the holiday of Passover. We don't eat it. We don't eat the offerings, It's a symbol. Same happens with the zroa. Zroa is a symbol, which is actually usually it's a roasted bone. It has to be a piece of something roasted with a bone, because it stands for the Passover offering. And so, of course, we don't eat that one either. So we have the roasted egg and we have the roasted bone. These are on top. In the middle, you have maror. Maror, of course, is something that symbolically represents the bitterness, the harshness of the way Egyptians were treating us as we were enslaved by them in Egypt. So maror is the bitter herbs. What can be maror? Pretty much anything that's bitter would do. The Ashkenazi custom is, I guess we had a very bitter experience in our Ashkenazi galut, more so than the Sephardim. So the Ashkenazi custom is, even though Talmud speaks about some green leafy vegetables that have mildly bitter taste, something similar to, I guess, what many people use today, romaine lettuce. But Ashkenazi custom is to use the real deal, which is chrein, which is, of course, really, really bitter. If you use the horseradish root is pretty bitter. Some people also put, you have the mixture of chrein, of the horseradish prepared, and you can garnish it, horseradish root with that. There are all sorts of ways how to do it. Actually, if you have this order of things like you have on this plate, there's two things here that stand for bitter herbs. That's maror and that's charoset. Chazeret. And chazeret is what usually people use for, if they arrange the plate this way, they would put the horseradish, and that's going to be in maror place, which is in the middle of the plate. And right underneath, all the way down the bottom, they're going to put the romaine lettuce, which is going to be where it says chazeres. And we're going to use both together, intermittently, as we have 2 points at which we eat in maror. We have just maror for the mitzvah, which is a rabbinical commandment of eating maror, which comes right after matzah. And then we have the sandwich, where we're going to have it with charoset. We're going to dip it into charoset, which gives it a little mild, sweety aftertaste. So at that point, people usually, they use both romaine lettuce and the real bitter stuff, which is, of course, the horseradish. So technically, it's totally fine to use either of them. You don't have to use both, but I guess it's pretty cool to use both, because actually we don't get in this video into all this halachic shiurim there, how much you should eat what. I don't want to get into those. You can find it, most editions of Passover Agadah will have those things. Generally speaking, you need to eat kizayit. How much is kizayit? It's pretty much the volume of a little matchbox. So you can figure out exactly what that is in terms of size. Many people are very machmir, very stringent, and you're going to find all sorts of huge amounts they're going to give you. I don't think that's not necessary to be that stringent. And I think, again, we need to enjoy the Seder, and it's quite important. And if you do what halacha requires you to do, and you also enjoy it, you also have fun. I know maror is not really the place where we're talking about fun. This is actually meant to be bitter. But again, how much bitter you really want to make it after all the cleaning that you had. So it's really up to you to decide. Now, what else we have on the Seder plate? We have karpas, and karpas could be anything that's not maror. It's a vegetable, but it's not a bitter vegetable. So Ashkenazi custom very often was basically, you have a potato. Potato, of course, originating in South America, is something that's not a native for Europe, but it became very popular, as you know, with Spanish people discovering it in Peru and bringing it to Europe. And very soon it became, today it's associated with Belarus out of all places, right? Eastern Europe, Poland, Belarus, Russia, it's considered to be like now our food, but actually, of course, we know it originates in South America. But potato is something that's very commonly used for karpas. But again, you can use anything. You can use celery. You can use any type of a vegetable that's not maror. It has to be not bitter. So if you use romaine lettuce for maror, you're certainly not going to use any type of lettuce for karpas. You're going to use maybe celery or maybe any other vegetable that's not bitter. By the way, the word karpas is clearly not a Hebrew word. We don't know the origin of the word. It sounds like it has 4-letter root, and Hebrew words only have 3-letter roots. That's just something funny. And we're going to get to karpas. We're going to see there's a lot of funny things about karpas. It's kind of an unusual type of thing. It adds a little bit of a taste of, I guess, eccentric Jewish eccentricism to the Seder. So even the name itself is not clear. And so we had, basically we covered the plate, and I spoke a little bit about all of the ingredients. The last one is charoset, and charoset is, as we know, is a mixture which has a pleasant sweet taste. You usually put some wine into it. You have walnuts, you have apples, and all those sweet things together. And you can get one, if you don't have time to prepare one yourself, you can get one ready to eat. You go to Pomegranate, if you really want to get fancy, or you can go to Moshe's, any other store. They usually have those ready to consume. So that could be saving you some time in your pre-Passover preparation. Okay, so we have the plate. Now we're going to go over the steps. So what happens? We have in 15 steps. Step number 1, Kadesh. We do the Kiddush. Now, what's unusual about this year? Again, this year has so many unusual things. This year we have Havdalah that's incorporated into Kiddush. So this is something you need to be careful with, especially if you're the one who's leading the Seder. You got to prepare, before Shabbos, you got to prepare the lights for the Havdalah. Of course, you cannot just go ahead and, it's Yom Tov, you cannot just go ahead and lit that light on for the Havdalah candle, and you cannot extinguish the light. So you got to use the existing light, and you're going to make a bracha on the existing light that's there. So you got to prepare those, you can buy in a Jewish store, 48-hour light, and it's got to be prepared before Shabbos. It's got to be lit and prepared, or you can lit, actually, as you lit your Yom Tov candles, you can use from the Yom Tov candles, you can use the light, and that's going to be the light of the Havdalah. You can do that as well. The only thing is, it's got to be something that you're not going to extinguish. You're going to remember that, because you're not allowed to extinguish the light on Yom Tov. So that's going to be part of your Kiddush. That's incorporated in your Kiddush. So you take a look here in this edition, in your Family Agada edition, you have this on page 20, right? You have your Kiddush. So in addition to regular thing, you have an insert, page 22. Motzei Shabbos, if Seder falls on Saturday night, so then you have the special blessing for Havdalah. We don't do full-fledged Havdalah. It's an Havdalah between the holiness of Shabbos and a little bit lower holiness of Yom Tov. We kind of go down. Shabbos is considered to be the most holy, so that's why Havdalah. So we kind of go down, but it's still Kodesh. Of course, it's not a regular day. It's Pesach, of course, so it's a holiday. It's Yom Tov, so it's Ben Kodesh LeKodesh. We make an Havdalah between the two levels of holiness, Dusha. And the only thing we say is the blessing on light. We don't do the blessing on Besomim. Besomim is, of course, a pleasant smell. We only do it if we separate between Shabbos and a regular day, right? So here we only have a Me'orei Hash, only the lights, and then we have the blessing of the actual separation. So that's as far as Kiddush is concerned. So we need to remember, so we actually this year, we're lucky. We have an extra mitzvah. We have a mitzvah of Havdalah incorporated into Kiddush. We have a mitzvah of Kiddush, and let us not forget, we have another important mitzvah. This is going to be the first glass of wine, the first cup out of 4 cups. We have 4 cups of wine, which is a rabbinical mitzvah for the Seder. It's an important one because it really basically creates the whole understanding of what Seder is about. 4 cups of wine at the Seder correspond to the 4 languages of redemption which Torah uses. So when our sages were thinking of how to create this Seder, we understand with the 4 cups of wine corresponding to the 4 languages of the Geulah, of the redemption, that the whole Seder essentially is a process of us coming out of Egypt. And we're going to see that highlighted at the end of the Maggid section very clearly. So it's not just us remembering what happened in the past. It's not like most nations having their celebrations, the holidays of something that happened many years ago, but nothing really happens right now. It's essentially very different. It's meant to be us in the process of coming out of Egypt this very moment, this time. And that's really something that makes it very beautiful and meaningful. So we have really 3 mitzvahs at this point. We have Kiddush mitzvah, Havdalah mitzvah, and the first cup of wine, which is a special thing for Pesach. And of course, everybody's drinking that. And another little hint, another little thing to remember, we have signs, simanim, signs at the Seder, at the Passover Seder, that are representing Geulah, representing redemption, representing freedom. And we have in those representing slavery, avdut. So those that representing slavery, they're bitter ones, right? They're the ones that we eat in a regular manner. However, those that represent freedom, we eat in the reclining manner, which is again another mitzvah, it's a rabbinical commandment to eat those things reclining. And this is one of the things that is really important at the Passover Seder to do and to remember. At the same time, I just want to make a point, ironically, again, this is a very Jewish thing, right? We even things we are meant to enjoy, we kind of remake in such a way that we end up not being particularly enjoying. It's so ironic if you think about it, right? So reclining at a chair, at a regular chair, I need to recline on the left side, right? So I'm sitting on a chair, make it less comfortable. I'm supposed to feel like a king. And lo and behold, I'm sitting and drinking my wine, hardly making it, and spilling it all over my shirt. That's pretty crazy. So, of course, if you take a look at the history of it, you're going to see that this whole thing started with us having Passover Seder remodeled after Greek symposium, which was done in a Greco-Roman setting where philosophers will be sitting and having discussions. And that's what happens here. We're having a discussion. And they will be reclining. They wouldn't be sitting on those chairs. These are European chairs, right? They didn't have those. They would be sitting on the floor, on the carpets. And they will be reclining on the cushions. And this would be extremely comfortable. We're having small tables. We know Mishnah and the Talmud speaks about it. That's how it was in the Greco-Roman world. And we adopted that. And we remodeled our Seder based on that. So technically, and I'm looking forward to have a Seder like that. That will be a lot of fun. If we can do a Seder like that, in an Eastern style, in a Greco-Roman / Eastern style, where you have a nice, beautiful carpet, and we're all sitting on cushions and reclining, it will be real fun having those low tables. Each one would have his own little table next to him. And we'll be very comfortable. But, well, we don't do it. We do it in an uncomfortable way because we mixed two different traditions. And as a result, we came up with this, right? But let's make the best out of it, at least in our intention, in our head when we recline. Ladies, by the way, don't need to recline. But if they may, though, if they want to, when we recline, we need to remember, at least in our minds, that this is something that's supposed to be a sign of freedom. One of the ways to do it is to prepare a nice and pleasant pillow, and you can put it, just make sure it's the right size, on your left side at the right moment, and you're reclining on a pillow this way. Of course, it's more comfortable. So maybe one of the good ideas to prepare before the Seder is to prepare those pillows, and that's going to make your Seder way more comfy. I think it's important. It's a good thing to do. Okay, so we are done with Kadesh. Next comes, of course, Rchatz. So we wash our hands. At this point of the Seder, one would think, if things go normally, so far, so good, we just start with the Kiddush. Every Yom Tov starts with the Kiddush. So no changes up until this point. Then we wash our hands, and you would expect after washing, we're going to eat bread. In this case, of course, matzah. Wow, that's not the point, though. Here we eat something unusual. We eat karpas. So we wash our hands, and the reason we do that is because it's an halacha that not many people know, or at least not many people practically apply on a daily basis. The halacha is that if you have a vegetable or a fruit that has been dipped in some liquid, the 7 types of liquids I mentioned, that are mekabel tumah, that basically make it impure, even though we don't follow the laws of impurity and purity in our general halacha today, at this particular instance we do. So therefore, if you have grapes at the table that are being washed and they're wet, technically you should wash your hands for those grapes. Not many people know that. Not many people remember that. Here at the table, we're making a point of this halacha, which is not really well known and remembered. And of course, everybody's gonna, what's going on in here? It's coming at the wrong time. It's not something known. And we're having some vegetable which has an unusual Greek name, karpas. So what's going on in here? And this, of course, is the point at which we should really kind of start asking questions. And, well, we're going to have questions very soon at the very beginning of Magid. And usually kids are the ones to ask those questions. But, of course, we understand it's our rabbis who came up with the questions. And the idea of those questions is actually to get us a little excited. So the thing with the karpas, and that's exactly what the rabbis are saying at this point of the Seder, is that the little kids should kind of get awakened to what's going on. People are used to having things in a particular routine way. So one of the ideas of the Seder, we don't want the routine. We really want to go out of the routine. One of the ideas of freedom is you don't follow the habit. You get out of the habit. You don't follow the comfort. You get out of the comfort zone. And we have been taken out of our comfort zone. We have been taken out of habitual with the scarpas thing. And that's the beauty of it. Now, should you make a blessing, Borei Pri Adama? The answer is yes. You should make a brocha. Should you recline on karpas? The answer is no, because you dip it in a salt water, and that, of course, is the symbol of slavery. And something that's a symbol of slavery, you do not recline for that. Okay, cool. So we've done that. Everybody got a little piece of celery or a little piece of whatever you use, potato, right, or any other non-bitter vegetable. And next thing is yachatz. Yachatz, of course, is we break the matzahs. Now, according to the custom of the Gaon of Vilna, there's only 2 matzahs. And the reason regularly we would have 3 matzahs is with all the beautiful symbolism. You know, I'm a Litvic. I got to explain things to you in a simple way. With beautiful symbolism is you have 3 layers of the Jewish people. You have the Kohen, the Levi, and the Israel, and all sorts of other symbolic explanations. They're all good and true, but certainly the halachists were the ones to create the Seder, and they were the ones who modeled the Seder. So the idea of 3 matzahs comes from the fact that if you break the middle one, you still need for hamotzi at any Yom Tov or Shabbos meal, you need to have 2 matzot, right? And they need to be full. That's the custom, right? That's halacha actually. You need to have a regular Shabbos, a regular Yom Tov. You would use 2 chalas for the bracha, right? So you don't want to have a broken one. So technically, we don't really understand why Gaon of Vilna, out of all people, one of the greatest halachic minds, he would actually say that 2 matzahs is just good enough. And he would insist that broken matzah on Passover has a specific significance. A broken matzah has a very specific, even halachic significance, and it's not a problem. It's actually more valuable than the full matzah, and therefore it's not a problem to make a bracha of a motzi and the blessing on a matzah when you only have 1 full matzah and the other one being broken. Because it's been broken for a very special mitzvah, and that's when we break the matzah, we break it for the mitzvah of afikomen. Afikomen, of course, is a Greek word. Afikomen is something that happens at the end. It's, so to speak, a dessert. It's, so to speak, something that is, it's probably not afikomen, it's really meant to be epikoman. Like many words we know in Greek language with epi, right? Something that happens at the end. So, because in Hebrew language, it's true until today. Many Israelis, when they have Latin or English words, they don't know how to, and they're spelled in Hebrew, they don't know the difference between pei and fei, right? So Hebrew would prefer fei. It's a natural sound for the Hebrew language, so and it would sound more natural for the Hebrew ear, afikoman than epikoman. But really it's epikoman, something that comes after food. So that bigger piece of matzah, symbolically representing the Paschal offering, which would be eaten at the end of the night, that's the last thing that's supposed to be eaten. So Passover Seder resembles that thing, that idea, and so afikoman will be eaten at the very end of the meal. And so it's been hidden, it's been put away, and of course we have this beautiful tradition. It's one of those things that kids are kind of getting active, and you can prepare, if you have little kids for sure, you can prepare some gifts for them, and you put the afikoman inside, and you see they obviously know what they're going to do at this point. At some point they're going to sneak and take it away. They usually do it when you go and involved in conversation during a meal, or possibly when people go out and they wash their hands for bread. There are all sorts of places and moments where they can do it. And then later, when you're going to need afikoman, you're going to go, "Where's my afikoman?" And the kids just stole it. They took it away. So that kept them awake all the way to afikoman. In other words, they kept them awake. This little thingy kept them awake through half the Seder, or even more, which is already like mission accomplished. That's pretty good if that happens. So it's a nice little custom, and many people follow it, and it's a good idea to prepare some gifts, and they're going to ask something for the afikoman, you're going to give them. So at this point, we start Magid. Magid, of course, being the most important section of the Passover Seder. So as we start Magid, we actually start with a proclamation in Aramaic language. Agadah is in Hebrew. Why would you use Aramaic? Well, one simple answer is Aramaic at the time was like Hebrew today, or like English today, was the language of the vernacular, was something that everybody understood. So simple people would not speak Hebrew. The rabbis would speak Hebrew. But a simple people would understand and speak Aramaic language. If we're looking at a Second Temple Judaism, Aramaic, of course, is the language that originated in the Assyria, in that area, modern-day Iraq, and spread, modern-day Iraq and Syria, and spread throughout the Middle East. So when we speak Aramaic, this means we want to make sure everybody understands what they say. And we start with this beautiful proclamation. This is the bread of affliction or the bread of poverty. Two translations, lachma anya, could be both. And both are true. And we point at the matzah at this point. We we lift the broken matzah. Everybody sees the broken matzah. And the broken matzah is shown in the fact that it's broken, of course, is very symbolic. As Vilna Gaon just pointed out, the whole idea of slavery at the beginning of a Seder, matzah symbolically represents slavery. It's broken, right? So you see the bread of affliction. You see the bread of poverty. The same Hebrew word could stand for both poverty and affliction. You know, lachma aniya, aniyut could be from the word ani, which means poor, so then it's a bread of poverty. Could also mean bread of affliction. You know, it could be coming from la'anot, like you have inui. Inui in Hebrew means affliction. So it could be both, which is actually very interesting. It's a kind of double play on a negative meaning of what matzah stands for at the beginning. So at this point of the Seder, you have matzah clearly being the sign or symbol of broken spirit of the Jewish people, symbol of us being enslaved, symbol of us starting at a very low point. Rabbis in the Talmud saying the whole idea of the Passover Seder, we start with gnut, we start with something negative, and eventually we go into something positive. So it's a ascent. It's a journey from a low point to a high point at the end. So we start at a low point, and that's we're starting with this proclamation that this is the bread of poverty and affliction that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. Whoever is hungry shall come and eat. Whoever is needy, let him come and celebrate Passover. We say, now we are here, but next year we're going to be in the land of Israel. Well, that's really not exactly the right translation. Everybody uses this translation. It doesn't say really that. If you take a look in Hebrew, in Aramaic rather, it says Leshana Haba'ah, which means towards the next year. So it's actually as of now and on. It's not like we're going to wait for the whole year until one day maybe we'll become free people. And one day maybe we'll come to Israel. It actually meant to be set an intention for the future, which starts now. It's a continuous tense, but that starts actually, it's almost like a present continuous that goes into the future. Something that starts now, and basically expectation of the immediate future, it's going to happen. So we're setting our goals for Israel, we're setting our goals for redemption, for being free people. And we understand basically at this point we are not free people. And at this point we still need to liberate ourselves from all sorts of Mitzrayim, all sorts of Egypts, whatever limiting beliefs we have. So at this point, of course, the kids usually the ones who sing Manishtana. Manishtana, the 4 questions that we have here, point at 4 distinctions between the Passover night and what happens on a regular type of night, on a regular type of a holiday of night even. We usually don't do any of those things we do on a Passover night. So what are these 4 things? Of course, you know, the first one is about matzah. The regular night we can have chametz or matzah, whatever we want, but here we only have matzah. The second is, of course, that we eat maror. And then we have one about dipping, and we dip twice. We just dipped with karpas and salt water, and then we have a dip with charoset. We got to do that as we approach the point of the meal, and we got to have a second dipping. And of course, dipping, if you think about dipping, is something that is actually symbolic for the idea of the Seder being taking us out of the regular. Even though today we can use all sorts of dips, and you know we live at very luxurious times. If you really think about it, we live at times when we can afford so many things that ancient people could not. You know, they described at the time of the Talmud, one of the great things about the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the famous rabbi of the Mishnah, the one who basically created the Mishnah as we know it today, and he was a contemporary of Antoninus. We don't know exactly who is Antoninus. According to one opinion, could be even Roman emperor, potentially even Marcus Aurelius, but it's certainly been a very important and noble Roman official. So they could afford something, Talmud says, that nobody could. And what is this? Radish. They could afford radish even out of season. Now, what's the big deal? You go to Brighton Beach, you go to any of those grocery stores, and you buy radish, right? Anybody can do it these days. So we do not appreciate the luxury of today lifestyle that we have. You know, we can have vegetables and fruits out of season, and we just enjoy it on a daily basis. So even though I'm having coffee from a plastic cup, it's Pesach coming up, right? L'chaim for that one. So what happens essentially is with dipping that we are meant to think of ourselves being almost like royalty, because dipping back in the day could only very wealthy people could afford that. That was certainly out of order and something that regular people would never do. And finally, the fourth one, of course, is reclining, which again is something that very important people will do, right? Regular people will be having their meals in a very simple type of atmosphere, but royalty, noble people, they will be reclining on those cushions and having those meals. So we essentially meant to feel, with the last two, we meant to feel that sense of us being, very noble, in us being the sons, the princes and the princesses, the sons of God. Okay, we go on, and usually, as I said, Manishtana, it's a point where kids can do that. They can do a little sketch, they can do a little song, and especially if they go to Jewish school, they certainly know it. Even if you don't know the tune, it's not a big deal. You can find, go on YouTube and find the tune for Manishtana, and anybody can do it, really. It's not a big deal. If you do it in English, you can do it in English, that's fine. You can do a little sketch about it, about the four things that are different between Passover and the regular night. There's all sorts of ways how you can do it. Next comes the story. And the story, of course, is another mitzvah, which is the mitzvah in the Torah. And the Torah tells us very clearly that the idea of Passover night is to tell the story of the Exodus to your son. And because there are four different places in the Torah where Torah speaks about it, and the language is not the same, rabbis came to the conclusion we have four sons. So that's how we come into the four sons. So we have four languages of redemption, that's the four cups. We have in four places in the Torah where Torah speaks about, you need to tell your son about the Exodus. We have in the four sons. Before we get there, we have two beginnings. We have two different points, low points of the Haggadah. And again, we're doing the Jewish thing. We just combine two opinions in the Talmud. We have Rav and Shmuel that disagree whether one should start with us being slaves and eventually becoming free people. And that's where we start the actual Passover text on page 26 in this edition, that we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. But then, later in the text, as we move through the four sons, we got to have another beginning. We got to have another beginning on page 30, where we say that originally our ancestors were idol worshippers. And that happened way earlier, even before Abraham, because, a Rav wants to make a point, it's about spiritual redemption. So it's a redemption from us being idol worshippers and becoming close to God. Shmuel makes a simple point that this is about the actual event of the Exodus, from very physical Egyptian yoke that we were under. So we incorporated both opinions into the text. How typically Jewish it is. It's really interesting, right? We're having two beginnings. Okay, and in between those two beginnings, we're having the four sons. And the four sons, of course, you have so many different ways how to make it fun and interesting and all sorts of sketches. I even saw now with very recent with American presidents being the four sons. Guess who's wise and who's not exactly, who's, doesn't know even how to ask a question. One can think and point in all sorts of directions. I'm not going to say anything. Let's stay apolitical at this point. But yeah, you can really make it fun. You can really make it fun, even with American presidents or whatnot. So you have all sorts of editions, beautiful editions, artistic editions of Haggadot from medieval times, where you have those pictures of four sons. You would usually have a picture of the righteous one, the wise one, being with a beard in a traditional Jewish garb. And the second guy very often would come, especially Renaissance edition, early 17th century editions or 18th century editions. You would have a son that looks already wearing a non-Jewish clothing and dressed up to the last fashion, and and that's a son that looks almost like a non-Jew. He's of course the wicked one. And so we can understand, basically going through the pages of those different editions of the Haggadah, how the Jewish community, how we looked at those four positions. One of the contemporary positions, of course, is that as the fifth son, the one that doesn't come to the Seder altogether. That's a famous saying of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Which is an interesting one, really, if you think about it. Because what happens today is they really have, despite the fact that Pesach is so popular, you have many Jews who don't even know about what's going on. And maybe our obligation is to take a deeper look at how we make sure, we maintain this tradition and keep it interesting and exciting. Okay, so we move on. We are having the story of the Exodus developing. And at this point, there's a lot of Aggadic interpretation that if you're not familiar with the Talmud, you can easily get bored with. So what I usually do at this point if you want to stick to the letter of the law, you really want to go for the whole text, which, by the way, you don't have to. You really don't have to. As long as you tell the story of the Exodus, that's totally fine. You pick the key elements of the story, and you don't have to do the whole thing. But if you really want to do the whole text, you can tell people, okay, now we go and we do individual reading. I usually make this analogy with a B train that runs express. So from this page to that page, and you're going to run express through the story, which is basically here in my edition, starting at page 32, and you have this homiletic interpretation, Talmudic type of interpretation, which people are not familiar with the Talmud, going to get lost very easily with. And you want to make a stop at the point where we talk about the 10 plagues, of course. And the 10 plagues is where you're going to have the sketches. Before the 10 plagues, you have on page 36, you have a point at which we usually do what we do later with the 10 plagues, and that's we take a pinky and we remove a little bit of wine from our glasses. By the way, I didn't mention the fact that with wine, we usually try to keep our glasses full. So after we drank the first glass, the Agadah has been said on the second glass. First is for Kiddush. The second one is throughout the whole Magid section. We're going to drink that at the end of the Magid section as we finished with the story of the Exodus. And so basically we're having our glasses full at this point. So what we do, we remove just a little bit, tiny bit from the glass because we mentioned something bad that happened to Egyptians. And we show some sort of an empathy at this point, which is a beautiful sensitivity. So we talk about blood, fire, and columns of smoke. We do that, and that's usually where I say, okay, let's stop here and do this. And then we move on, we have the 10 plagues. And at this point, you really get interesting because you can do all sorts of things. You can, these days you have, sketches. You have all sorts of little, especially you have kids who prepare that and prepare something at school, in the kindergarten. You can use that as a point where everybody get excited. People finally jump out of the table and you can create all sorts of interesting interactions. And that's a good idea to do because it's a long night and you certainly want to make sure everybody's awake and not falling asleep. Okay, so we move through the 10 plagues. And again, we have a bit of that, homiletic interpretation. I'm not getting into details at this point. We don't have much time for that. From page 38 to page 40, we have 3 different versions of 3 rabbis talking about the fact how if in Egypt with 10 plagues, God was only showing his finger. But by the sea, which of course is the 7th day of Passover, by the sea we're having the hand of God. And the hand obviously has 5 fingers, so that's 5-fold greater revelation of the presence of God. And each one comes with its own homiletic interpretation. It's Jewish arithmetics. It's cool. It's interesting. You can do a little research on that, but you're probably not going to have much time at the Seder to talk about it. So we're moving on to Dayenu. And Dayenu is beautiful because it's a song that everybody can sing. And if you don't know the text, you can just use one word and everybody can follow, right? All you need to know is Dayenu. And everybody goes, Dayenu, Dayenu. So it's beautiful. It's very simple. Everybody can follow, So definitely it's a good idea to get everybody engaged. And, again, you want to do it. I usually, when I do communal seders, I try to rap a little bit. So it's fun. You do it fast. You go for the song. Everybody follows you with Dayenu. And you have, of course, many stanzas in here. It's a long song. And again, you can pick up how you want to do it. If you see people getting tired, you can do the first 2 stanzas, last 2 stanzas. The main thing, everybody's saying Dayenu. And we say, basically the idea is we enumerate all those things. For each and every one of those things, we have just one of those things that God have done to us. We would have already said, thank you, it's been enough. And at the end of the day, we have in 1 and 2 and 3, we have a very long list in here of things that God have done to us in the process of the Exodus. And it's very often the opposite of what usually we think. We think we haven't gotten enough, right? Whatever we get, we take it for granted and we say it's not enough. But the song really changes our mindset to think in a very opposite way. And that's what makes us Jews, because at the end of the day, the word Jewish and to be a Jew, Yehudi, somebody says thank you to Hashem. So that's the essence. Essentially, very beautiful message. Okay, we move on. And here we move to the point which seems to be a quintessential point of the Magid section, which is Rabban Gamliel, who's been one of the greatest rabbis, who was the head of the generation at the time, of course. And he said, you need to physically remind everybody at the table about the three most important symbols of the Passover night. So it says, if you haven't done that, you haven't fulfilled the obligation, because these are the most important things. So we got to point at two of them, but not at the one that we don't have. We don't have the Paschal offering. So when we say Pesach, we have nothing to point at, even though we have a symbol of the Pesach offering on a Passover plate, but that's just a symbol. So we don't point at anything. When they talk about Matzah, we got to point at the Matzah. We got to show Matzah to everybody. And then the bitter herbs, the maror. And what happens at this point, we give an explanation to all these three things, all these three concepts. So Pesach is Passover. English translation actually explains what it is. That God passed over the houses of the Jews who brought the Paschal offering. That's the name of the holiday. And that's an important concept to think about. Then you have Matzah. And at this point, you're going to make an interesting observation that Matzah, remember the beginning of the Maggid section, was the bread of poverty, was the bread of affliction. It's certainly slavery. It's not freedom. It's a broken piece of matzah. But at this point of the Seder, we say matzah represents the fact that we had to get out of Egypt very fast. We hadn't time. So it's the idea Chametz is when you get stuck in a place, when you get basically stuck in your preconceived notions and you cannot move. You're heavy. But matzah represents the opposite. It's a quick movement. It's the desire to change. It's the ability to change. It's the way where we grow, and that's how we accomplish freedom. So matzah at this point certainly stands for freedom. And it's a very beautiful concept, very beautiful idea. Actually, the Hebrew word chametz leachmitz in Hebrew means to miss the opportunity. You've been stuck in a place and you missed the opportunity. So matzah is when you don't miss the opportunity and you in the right place and at the right time. That's what matzah stands for. Action sometimes is needed and it has to happen immediately. And that's how the Exodus actually happened. So maror, of course, is the bitter herbs and remains throughout the Seder night what it is. So we explain that as well. Then we move on and we have a brief version of, at this point, because we finished the Maggid section, we have a brief version of what eventually will be Hallel. Here at this point, it's just a very brief version of it. So it's page 46. If you know the tune and you can do it and following the tune, beautiful. If not, and your guests are getting tired and hungry, you can quickly, go through it, explaining it that basically it's the section of thanks. You got to spend a couple of minutes on that, and then you move straight to the second glass of wine, which you're going to drink reclining. At this point, before you get to the most important mitzvot of the day, you got to remind people what happens, because they may not know. And so you got to tell people before they wash their hands that what's going to happen right now is after you wash your hands, you got to first of all perform the mitzvah of eating matzah at the Passover night. And I'm not getting technical, but you need to eat at least a kazait. So you make a calculation how much you want to eat. It depends on what type of matzah you have. Machine matzah, of course, is thinner, so it could be up to a half. If you have a thicker one, the hand matzah, it could be 1/3 or even less. But you eat it reclining, and ideally you should do it within 4 minutes. But if you cannot, or you feel difficulties, that's okay. You rely on more lenient opinions and you take your time. That's fine. It could be up to 8 or 9 minutes. But at this point, you still don't talk, which is really, really difficult for many people. So you got to tell them up front. After we eat matzah, we got to be eating maror right away. So wait for my signal where I got to do that, and we got to eat the bitter herbs. And then we eat not reclining. And then we got to do the sandwich, which was the custom of Hillel, where we put, maror inside the matzahs, and we put charoset, and that's where we dip the second time, and we eat that. Beautiful. Okay, so when we do that, finally, we can eat a normal food, believe it or not. At this point, we can just enjoy the meal. Usually, if it's quite late, you don't have that much time for the meal anyhow. But whatever you have, you can enjoy and have fun. Why I'm saying you don't have that much time, because many people have a tradition to eat afikomen before chatzot, before the midnight. But there are ways to avoid that, and they are custom saying they can do it throughout the whole night. There's also a certain way to do some sort of a conditioning, which I'm not getting into. It's a technical thing, but you can read about it. But basically, you can rely upon the lenient opinion. You can do afikomen even past that point. Okay, so we finished the meal, we bench. As we do Birkat HaMazon, we of course don't forget, well, if you use the standard Agada edition, you don't forget to put the insert for the holiday. And as you do that, at the end, we got to get to glass number 3. By the way, I didn't explain this point with the cups, where you drink in the cup, we all help each other. And that's a beautiful custom. We don't just pour to ourselves. We are being served. We are like a symposium, like the philosophers sitting at a symposium. So we are being served by each other. So we act as both princes, reclining and enjoying our royalty and our special status of being the sons and daughters of Hashem. But at the same time, we also serve each other and help each other with the choices of wine. You should have different wines at the table so everybody can enjoy whatever he wants. And that's a good idea to do it. Generally speaking, based on Kabbalah, based on all sorts of halachic considerations, if you can handle red wine, it's the best. But some people do white, and that's fine too. Whatever you can handle, you need to know that 4 cups of wine, you don't have to drink them in full. Many people do. And again, it's not necessarily, you don't have to do it. All you have to do is every single time you make sure that you have a mouthful of wine, which is about how much that is, depending on what type of glasses, what type of cups you use. It doesn't have to be that much actually. But again, if you want to enjoy and you like drinking wine like I do, then it totally can, get a little drunk and tipsy on Passover night, After all the cleaning, we deserve that, don't we? So, yeah, so it's a lot of fun. So we're having the third glass of wine after meal. At this point, probably we're getting a little tipsy. And, well, that's the point where we're getting to the section of praising God. After finally we ate the food, we feel, we went through the whole story of the Exodus. We already kind of feel liberated. And our physical body is also telling us, it's the right time to enjoy, to start really feeling that pleasure, that joy. So we're getting from the physical joy and pleasure to the spiritual one. But I forgot to mention, of course, I spoke about Afikomen, that you don't forget that. I mentioned that earlier, that Afikomen, which is the bigger piece of the broken matzah, which has been hidden, has to be eaten, of course, before the meal, before the end of the meal, before the Birkat Hamazon. It's the last thing we eat at the meal, right? So that's been mentioned. Okay, we've done Birkat Hamazon, we benched, we now go through Hallel. And Hallel, of course, is recited on the 4th glass of wine. And Hallel really is a nice section, but the problem is if you don't know Hebrew, and if you don't know how to sing those songs, you're going to get bored. So you got to do something interesting. You got to prepare something cool. If you have a person who knows how to read, you can have everybody else producing all sorts of sounds, maybe doing like a little orchestra, like something interesting, something cool. You got to read through that section. You got to remember the most important thing is it's not just about reading. It's about you experiencing the joy, the pleasure, and also it's about everybody at the table experiencing that elevated state of mind. You can do a little meditation at this point if people are not too drunk for that, to thank God for all the great things that happen in our life. You can do all sorts of cool things at this point. But again, you want to read through the whole thing. If people are capable and can do and can hold, that's fine. The most cases, it's probably not going to be necessarily true. So you want to go through a couple of paragraphs at the beginning singing, but then eventually you got to tell people, we're going to meet you at page such and such. Well, in our edition, you can do Kilo Olam Chazdo, which is really a nice tune everybody can do on page 70. And that's pretty much the final part of Hallel. Hallel goes, from 62 in this edition all the way to 74. So it's quite a bit of reading, And again, if your guests are not up to that, don't overwhelm them. Don't overwhelm them. You can do the whole thing yourself, but you can do it later even. You can do the beginning of it. You can do the Kilo Olam Chazdo, which is, I guess, the most important part of Hallel at this point. And you give thanks to God. Everybody can repeat that line, Kilo Olam Chazdo. And, you can do it again as like 2 voices. One person leads and everybody else goes Kilo Olam Chazdo. Any type of tune will do. It could be a lot of fun, especially if you do like a little, like your whole family and maybe 2 families competing against each other. All sorts of things could be done. It's really cool. And then, okay, fine. So you do that. And then, of course, after you're done with Hallel, you're going to drink the 4th cup of wine. You do that, and then you have to the last 15 point of the Seder, which is Nirtzah, basically saying, God, just accepted what we just did. And then you say, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, and as the French say, c'est tout. That's pretty much it. But, of course, at the very end, we Jews like those, extra things. And so we're having those songs at the end, which I used to enjoy a lot. And I probably still do. I may not have the right company right now. People are, families and stuff. People want to go to sleep. But back in my days at Rage, we used to do that till like 3 o'clock in the morning. You can still do if you have the right company to sing all the songs. Or you don't really have to. Because really you can finish your Seder at this point. But then you have all those nice and beautiful songs, and you have all those commentaries. Take a look at Vilna Gaon commentary, a mystical one on Chad Gadya, where you have a story which appears to be almost like a Jewish version of Old MacDonald had a farm, right? That's a Chad Gadya, essentially it's the same thing. But Chad Gadya actually has a deep meaning, and it's pretty much the story of reward and punishment. It's pretty much the story of how the world runs and how God, who's hidden, and you don't really see him on a daily, regular basis, essentially plays, and everything makes sense at the end. Although there are many questions to be asked. And well, that's pretty much the end of the Seder, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. I just really want to take some questions. If you have some, you can post them here. Let's take a look what you guys wrote. Well, I don't see any questions in here. I got to give a couple of minutes. If you have any questions or any comments that you want to make, let's see. We kind of ran through the Seder. It's late. It's 11. Hour and a half class. Pretty long, right? Okay, we have no questions, it seems. So I just want to wish everybody happy, healthy, and kosher Pesach this year. We should really feel, engaged and excited about the Seder. And it's going to give us a lot of good energy for the whole year. And wishing everybody a beautiful experience at the Passover Seder. And hope to see you, not just virtually, but hopefully with this Corona being over very soon, we're going to be able to run live programs again. Just want to remind you, if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, Jewish Explorer, please do so. There's a lot of good content there. And I'll see you soon, guys. Pesach.